everything that I do seems to wrap around itself around immigration. And I don't know why. It's a really funny thing for me. I never planned to go into this field at all. I was this ignorant British-born East Asian growing up in Birmingham. But it's in those human stories of my own parents that I completely was ignorant towards. My mum was a Vietnamese refugee who ended up in a small Northern Irish town for some strange reason. And my dad was a student from Malaysia who overstayed his visa. So it is kind of like destiny. And you were talking about funny names. My full name is V. Liam. Half of it's Vietnamese, half of it's Irish. I don't know why. My parents must have been drunk when they named me. But I'm going to talk to you about, so my specialty is human rights. That's my research. That's my immigration law as well. So I wanted to emphasize today the right to education from the perspective of the university, right? So I'm going to get quite legalistic here. Who knows about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? Yeah, I know you do. Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. So the world, with all its cultural, philosophical differences, different political ideologies, agreed back in 1948 there was such thing as universal human rights, specifically the right to an education, right? So I'm just going to read what it actually says. It believes, well, it states that primary and secondary education should be compulsory and free. Technical and professional education should be made generally available. And higher education shall be equally accessible to all on the basis of merit. So the basis of merit, if you can hack it, if you can get in, then come and learn. That's what the intention of this human right was, where the pursuit of knowledge, and this was uninhibited and actively encouraged. That's my interpretation of that right, anyway, in its purest form. So with this Declaration of Human Rights, there's an explicit agreement that this right to education is inherent. We're born with it, right? It's self-evident. Which means it's the duty of the government to facilitate this right as the duty bearers, right? To kind of enter it into the policy unencumbered by any political dogfighting. 20 years later, in 1966, we have the international covenants that codify the law into international law, right? And it further qualifies what the right to education actually means and what the government is meant to do. So it says that higher education should be made equally accessible to all on the basis of capacity by every appropriate means, and in particular by the progressive introduction of free education. Now, I'm kind of setting the scene here, right? That's the ideal world I'm talking about, where free and accessible education, it's whether you're born here or immigrating here, it doesn't really matter. In the purest form of immigration law, your circumstances shouldn't dictate your access to education. And we see ripples of this ideal world. Look at Norway, Germany, a lot of EU countries, they embody that ideology and work it into policy. And it's like a holy grail to them. It's untouchable. The right to education will make it free, or at least as cheap as humanly possible. So no matter what, you can access it, right? But we don't live in the ideal world. We live in the real world. I could bring it back to the UK. And in 2009, the Conservative government overhauled the immigration system. Boris Johnson likes to talk a lot about the points-based system that he wants to introduce. We have a points-based system already for non-EU nationals, right? So in rehauling this immigration system, he's made the higher education sector complicit in this hostile environment he wants to make, because now they have to abide by this concept of compliance. If we don't abide by this concept of compliance, if we don't meet certain points, I understand the kind of the argument for it, as in if we're going to sponsor people to come in, we should take responsibility of who we are sponsoring to come in, right? But it's missing the point of we have entry criteria, we have all these different things. But the blunt perspective of it is, yeah, we are complicit in a hostile environment. So I understand the argument that these institutions like universities and stuff have to protect their interests. But my point would be, when did the rights to education become surpassed by the immigration compliance atmosphere, the right to claw back costs? And it feels like we've made these tiers of citizenship where everyone has different access to human rights, and the right to education has just gone from its purest form to a diet form. Now, the Home Office say they want the best and the brightest. What they're actually saying is they want the best, brightest, and richest, which to me doesn't make sense. It doesn't embody that international human right that's codified in international law. In terms of equity and the spirit of that Declaration of Human Rights and the international covenants, we need to recognize the right to education is important, because in the words of the international law, which again I will read out here, the aim of emphasizing the right to education is because this is what the UN states: access to knowledge and information empowers everyone to participate in a free society. It promotes understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, all racial and ethnic and religious groups, and furthers the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. So I never want to forget when they were making these documents, right? The pursuit of pure, free, accessible education was the mandate. And we've lost that. We've lost our way, especially here in the UK. So I'll give you another framework to work with. So the Cobell Project. So if you don't know much about the Burmese Civil War, it's characterized as one of the longest civil wars in human history, right? It's still technically going on today, even though Burma is a country that had a democratic transition. On the border, there is a bunch of kids who have either escaped that war themselves or were born to those who have escaped because they're from marginalized ethnic minority groups that were being targeted by the Burmese junta. And I've known these kids that live in this border community for a long time. And this is really cliche, but when you ask them, what do you want for your future? They want to go to university, right? They want that opportunity for themselves. They want that opportunity that I had, right? But immigration and costs get in the way. We would call them asylum seekers and refugees if you want to characterize them. But the whole region doesn't recognize refugee convention. They have no authority to do anything. They could just live there if they just don't make a fuss. That's it. And that's tenuous when you think about it. I take that feeling, that safety I have as a British, Irish national in my heart, and I take that for granted. But I've met so many impassioned scholars and academics, support staff that want to do something. And they engage with like STAR, they engage with places like this. And when the government can't do anything, what can universities do more then? Now, I can get really personable here. University, to me, the degree, I'll be really blunt, means nothing. It doesn't mean a damn, the degree piece of paper. It doesn't mean anything without the experience behind it. The friends that you'll make, the community that you'll meet, these things that you equip yourself for the rest of your life to become a critically thinking adults. So what else can universities do? So I know there's, if not for scholarships that allow someone to study at university, what else? English lessons, free English lessons, mentorship for startup programs, enterprises, things like that. And these are the things universities want to put forward, if not for the bureaucracy and the money talks of trying to set up a scholarship. And it's these small things that work alongside of bigger conversations of let's try to set up scholarships to get refugees and asylum seekers into universities to embody that right of education, right? And take it forward into the community as well. If these small things change the narrative, then I'm hoping that the UK education sector one day could really truly embody the purest form of that international law, and everyone has the right to equal, accessible higher education. That's it from me. Thank you.